What's going on, y'all? It's your boy New, and today we're going to do something a little different. So, I was thinking, it's spooky season, so maybe we should do some horror stories or something. Spice up the channel a little bit. Get y'all in the mood for the holiday. So, I have a story here from Reddit, from my boy Page Profile, and I will be linking his Reddit profile in the description, along with the story, so y'all can check it out in text format if you want to, or check out his other stories. And yeah, let's get into it. My friend's birthday wish. Happy birthday, Isaac. Make a wish, Isaac's mom said as she placed the cake down onto the table. Wait, Isaac said. Aren't you going to sing happy birthday? Oh, right, his mom said in a matter of shock. I was never for the happy birthday song. At most, I'd murmur the tune, try to sound faint, and thankfully this year, everyone was at Isaac's party. There was me, of course, Josh, who was eyeing me down from across the table with his eyes that screamed, "Do we have to?" And finally, there was Matthew, who was sitting next to me looking over at Isaac with a warm but shy smile, showing that he was just as shy to sing as I was, but was willing to for Isaac. Our parents managed to come along too, since they were close friends, as our gang was. Well, all except for, did somebody say we're singing happy birthday? We heard Josh's uncle exclaim from the kitchen, slurring his words as he appeared from the kitchen doorway, downing what we all thought should have been his last beer, but we all knew better. Yes, Alan, Matthew's mother said with a clear but bit of irritation coming out of her voice. We're getting ready to start if you wish to attend, she sighed as she looked over to my dad with a gaze that asked, "Can you believe this loser?" Jeez. My dad let out a slight chuckle as he looked back to see the drunken man slumping over the table. Sure, he managed to get out coherently. I'll sing so loud you all won't even need to sing. Please don't, Isaac's dad replied. It's not necessary to be that loud. Isaac and I exchanged glances, and I could see that he wanted to say something, but he was never one for confrontation. I gave him a hearty half smile, and he seemed to have calmed down after the reassurance. Looking over at Josh, I could tell that the same trick wouldn't work twice. Josh was facing away from his uncle, his face as red as a tomato, and I could tell he was holding everything back so that he wouldn't yell at his uncle. The argument was going on for too long, and after working up the courage, I finally let it out. Excuse me, Mr. Moore, I said, with a not-so-confident tone, managing to make it loud enough to stop the argument dead in its tracks. Everyone looked at me, especially Josh's uncle, who probably was looking over to see three of me. It's not a competition, sir. It's just for Isaac's special day. He looked at me perplexed, scanned the room before muttering, all right, then slowly made his way behind Josh, and we all began to sing. Make a wish, honey, Isaac's mom said happily. Alan looked down at the cake and then up at us with a half smile across his face, and with one deep exhale, he blew out his candles. A roar of clapping and hoorays filled the room as Isaac's face turned red, rubbing the back of his head, and a wider smile spreading across his face. So, I said, what you wish for? I actually... You idiot, Josh exclaimed. He can't say it out loud, it won't come true otherwise. I began to feel my face turn red as I muttered out, oh, right, sorry. I looked back over to Isaac with an apologetic look on my face and could tell in that moment he thought I had nothing to be sorry for. So, I continued, how does it feel to be 12? Pretty exciting, I bet, I said with a bit of enthusiasm. Not bad, he blushed. About the same feeling as when I turned 11, I suppose, he continued as he let out a chuckle. Just wait until next year, buddy, my dad said. Your teens is when it begins to feel different. At least for me it was. He chuckled as he patted me on the shoulder. What do you mean by that, Dad? I asked. What's so different? A cough came from Matthew's mother, choking on the soda she had just sipped as she began to blush. All in time, children, she blurted out. All in good time. Every one of us all gave each other a confused glance and collectively shrugged, and we decided to leave it. The party continued as normal after that. The cake was eaten, the presents were opened, and plenty of fun games were played. I think my favorite was the Nintendo 64 Isaac had received from his parents with Mario Kart 64. Oh, such a good game. I was pretty sure that was also Isaac's favorite gift too, since it had come out just a couple months ago, and he begged and pleaded with his parents just for the 64. So his excitement was incredible when he opened up his gift to see Mario Kart as well. Sadly, the party had to end at some point, and we were all getting ready to leave. My dad went to start up the cars for everyone. Good thing Matthew's folks offered Josh and his uncle a ride home. He was close, if not already blackout drunk. As the three of us turned around to say goodbye to Isaac, we were caught in a big bear hug from him. "Thanks, guys," he said as I began to start trying to spit out his blonde hair as it kept getting into my mouth. "No problem, man," Matthew said. "Yeah, man, we're your friends. What you think, we wouldn't come at all?" Josh said as Isaac lifted his head up to look at us, tears in his eyes, face red, and that big smile still plastered on his face. "You're right," he chuckled, "but I still appreciate it." He let go, and we all gave smiling glances to one another. "Sir, can I help you?" we heard my dad say outside. "It's freezing out here, sir. You'll freeze to death," my dad continued as Isaac's dad went outside to see what was wrong. When he finally made it to my dad, they both eyed down the mysterious figure and stood there for a minute before one turned the flashlight on the person standing at the edge of the driveway. They both looked at each other and nodded in silent agreement, and headed back towards the house. As they turned around, I noticed both of our parents' faces were blank, eyes wide open, as they were both power walking back to the house. I stood in the doorway confused by what was happening as I couldn't properly see the person's face. And by the time they had made it to the door, I didn't have a chance to ask, as Isaac's dad proceeded to slam the door and lock it, as my dad ran to the kitchen and he exclaimed, "Lock all the doors and windows, now!" Matthew and Isaac's mom gathered us into the living room. Isaac's dad hurried up the stairs to lock the windows. Matthew's mom then proceeded to lock all the windows in the living room, while Isaac's mom went for the windows in the guest room and bathroom downstairs. My dad came back into the living room, telephone in a slumped hand, beeping endlessly, the look of terror on his face as he was breathing heavily. "Dad?" I panicked. "What's going on?" My dad just looked at us and told us to stay away from the windows as he beckoned the adults to go into the kitchen. "What do you think's going on?" Matthew asked with a tone of concern in his voice. "Probably some druggie that's confusing Isaac's house for his own," Josh replied. Everyone seemed still in that moment, worried that any form of movement would lead to that thing breaking in. I began to shake, fear washing over me like a tidal wave, as I began to wonder what was happening. Moving my head slowly, I began to look over the kitchen to see our parents, who were talking with animated movements. The only one audible from the kitchen was Josh's uncle, who was the most animated of all, but doing a terrible job of expressing what he was saying. "You're all full of it," he said. "It's probably just some high buffoon who's got himself lost. I can take him with one arm tied around my back," he stated pridefully as his composure failed him by slumping against the refrigerator. Wanting to hear more of what they were saying, I began to move towards the door despite the whispering. "What are you doing?" behind me. I managed to press up against the side of the door frame, but by the time I made it over, the only thing I heard was my dad calling Josh's uncle an idiot before Josh's uncle came through the doorway and walked over to the front door hallway. "Wait," Isaac's dad said frantically. "You didn't see what James and I saw. It's not worth it." "Oh, really?" Josh's uncle stated. "What did you see? You both still won't even tell us." My dad and Isaac's dad both looked at each other, then over at us. "Trust us," he said. "You won't like it." I grew more concerned. The more our parents were hiding the truth from us, but I knew better than to distrust my dad and what he said. Jack's uncle just waved him away and reached for the door handle, and what happened next will haunt me to this day. Standing right outside, just a few centimeters away from Josh's uncle's face, was a figure unlike anything I've ever seen. The thing looked like a walking corpse, tattered clothing, rotten flesh that was falling apart in various places, and jet black hair that was down to his shoulders. But the only thing that was really stood out was the grin that unnaturally stretched from ear to ear. Everyone stood silent in shock. Our parents gasped and put themselves in front of us, but Josh's uncle stood his ground. "What do you want, punk?" Josh's uncle said with a remarkable confidence for someone who's eyeing down a literal zombie. "You want a piece of me? Huh?" he screamed. "Uncle Alan, please," Josh said. All of us looked at Josh surprised. He hadn't said a word this entire time, and with that one sentence I knew why. Josh was scared. Josh was the fearless one of our group, which usually meant it was him that always got us into trouble, doing idiotic activities that we shouldn't be doing. But in this moment, he was actually scared. Just shut the door, please, he pleaded. The look of fear and worry on Josh's face was immense, but I couldn't understand why. Jack's uncle is all he had left for family, and while he's a miserable drunk, Josh still cared for him, and knew that if he was gone, he'd have to go away and never see us again. Bah, you all are scared of this loser, he said with bravery, or idiocy, turning around and pointing at it. If you ask me, this guy's just a no-good gah! He shrieked as we all looked down to see him gripping his leg now having a sickle in it. He looked up at us, and we all could tell he sobered up in that moment, now with just the look of terror in his face. Terrified, I panicked, and in an instant, I ran to Josh's uncle to try and grab him, but it was already too late. All at once, Josh's uncle got slammed to the ground as his leg moved from underneath him, and he was dragged away screaming out the door. "No! Uncle Allen!" Josh said, frantically running to the door. But he was pulled back by Matthew's mother into a tight hug, Josh reaching an arm out towards the door as Isaac's dad slammed it shut and locked it. Josh was now crying, still held tightly by Matthew's mom, and we all went to comfort him as a sense of dread surrounded all of us. Josh's uncle wasn't the best person in the world, but none of us hated him, and now that he was gone, we were all left with a cloud of sorrow, but none more so than Josh. After a while, we all calmed down as much as we could, and we all agreed to hold out until morning. Our dads took the first shift watching over us, guns in hand from Isaac's dad's gun rack, and after a while some of us managed to sleep. I say some because while I had almost managed to sleep, I was disrupted by a tearful sniffling from Josh. Not knowing what to say, I put a hand on his shoulder, to which he responded by looking at me with his tear-soaked eyes, and I tried to tell him everything would be okay by giving him a reassuring smile. He seemed to calm down a bit after that, not smiling, but he did stop sniffling. "I'm sorry, Josh," we heard from behind us. Both of us looked up to see my dad looking out of the window with a stone-cold expression on his face. "I promise that thing will pay," he said. "Thank you," Josh said quietly. "What do you think it is, Dad?" I asked, whispering. "I don't know, kid," he said matter-of-factly. "But whatever it is," he continued, "it's got one thing coming for him," he finished coldly, still looking out the window. "Dad," I whispered back. "What is it?" he asked, looking at me now. "I have to use the bathroom." He looked at me, his face now looking a bit annoyed. Can it wait till morning? The urge had come all at once. But my dad knew how frantic my bladder was, thanks to my anxiety. I shook my head and he sighed. "All right, I can go with him," I heard from behind me. I looked over my shoulder to see Matthew, rubbing his eyes and yawning. "I have to go too," he replied. Looking back at my dad, I could tell he was beginning to get more irritated. "All right," he responded, "but remember to scream should anything happen. Remember, Isaac's father is guarding the back area, so just holler, all right?" He said sternly. We both nodded and got up quietly to go down the hall to the bathroom. As we were walking, every step left a creaking sound. You never truly know how old a house is until you try sneaking around in one. Matthew looked at me, concern struck across his face. "You doing okay?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm fine," responding back to him with as much confidence as I could muster. I'm more worried about Josh. He seemed to have agreed with me, head sulking a bit after I said that. "Yeah, me too," he said as we finally reached the bathroom, and I allowed him to go first. Leaning up against the opposite wall from the bathroom, I looked out of the back door window, up at the moon, finally having a moment alone with my thoughts. I never felt more anxious in my whole life, and it was really giving my bladder a hard time to the point where I had to bounce my leg just to keep the urge of wetting myself at bay. I didn't know anything, and it was causing my mind to run rampant, that I couldn't even think straight anymore. And again, my full bladder didn't help me at all, but I had finally heard the toilet flush, and Matthew came out beckoning me to go next, as I was already rushing past him to go. Finally, relieving myself, I flushed the toilet and opened the door. Looking down, I saw Matthew shaking, eyes widened, and looking at me, hand gesturing for me to get down fast. Not understanding why, I looked down the hall and saw nothing. Then I turned my head, and as soon as I did, my body went cold, eyeing down the corpse just outside the window, grinning at me, and leaving fog on the window with every breath. I didn't move out of fear that if I had, it would make its move in an instant, but it didn't take long before the monster raised his sickle and broke through the glass with one swing. "Tim!" Matthew cried, as I let out a ferocious screech. I had just enough time to raise my arm so that it didn't hit my head, but the blade managed to get me in the arm. I was unable to process what was really going on before I felt myself being jerked towards the door. The thing laughing and trying to drag me out just like it did with Josh's uncle. Not knowing what else to do, I cried out for my dad. Matthew grabbed onto me the best that he could, but it wasn't enough. I could still feel myself going out the door, cold wind hitting my face, and in that moment, the only thing I could hear was the cackling laughter until I fell to the ground in an instant, the sickle still in my arm. I looked over to see Isaac's dad holding his pistol out, breathing heavily as everyone managed to show up behind Isaac and my dad at the front. Isaac hiding behind his dad. Matthew grabbed me and tried to push me up to run, but as he did, the door crashed open, and there the creature stood, head cocked, and that dreadful grin across his face, laughing away. "Make a wish," it said, in a demanding tone. His voice sounded hoarse, as if it had a whole wad of phlegm caught in his throat. A spray of bullets hit in his chest as it just laughed and grabbed the handle of the sickle and started dragging me away. Matthew in tow as he was trying to stop the thing, but sadly to no avail. "Not my friends too, you monster," Josh screamed as he bolted past my dad to help. Everyone in a panic now, guns firing, Matthew and Isaac's mom behind them out of fear of being shot. And then there was Isaac. Behind his dad, he was cowering in an almost praying position, mouthing out words to himself. The shooting finally stopped as I saw my dad run towards us, but in that moment my hand gave way, and I knew in that moment I was done for. Tears began to form as time slowed down, letting go of Matthew's grip and lifting into the air. Screaming was all I heard in that moment as I closed my eyes, my mind and body giving up for it. It knew it was already too late. I felt my body hit the ground before everything went dark. I awoke sometime later in the morning, I guess, since the light was shining out the window. Everyone was surrounding me, and as I began to wake up, Isaac turned around and gasped. "Tim," he said excitedly, everyone now turning their attention to me, smiling and letting out a sigh of relief. "What happened?" I said weakly, still feeling groggy. "The thing, it vanished," Isaac said dumbfounded. "Yeah," Matthew replied. "After you got flung out the door, the thing just vanished into nothing. After that, you landed in a pile of snow outside and your daddy grabbed you," Josh said, more concerned than what I was used to from him. I looked up to see my dad, who was resting himself against the top of the couch, and he nodded in agreement at the statement. "Thanks, everyone," I said back. "I really appreciated everyone trying to help. Even you, Isaac," I said to him, and he looked at me, concerned. "What do you mean?" he said. "I saw you praying. That counts, man," I assured him. "I know you were scared. I was too, believe me," I said with a faint laugh. His look of confusion still spread across his face. "Oh," he replied. You're welcome." "It looks like that thing is gone for good," my dad said. "I hope so," Isaac's mom replied. "Where did that thing even come from?" she said. "I don't know," my dad replied back, "but whatever it was, I'm going to find out," he said, determination in his voice. Looking down at me, he gave me a big smile. "It's daytime now, so we should get you to a hospital for that wound." He gestured at my arm, which was as well wrapped up in gauze as possible. I nodded my head at him and began to get up. As my dad went to start the cars, a bit of paranoia in each step, I turned around to see that Josh was hugging Isaac's parents as they had informed him that adopting him was something that they'd be happy to do, which was something that made all of us tear up a bit. Matthew was getting his coat on with his mom wrapping his scarf around him, and Isaac had begun walking over to me with a concerned look on his face. "I hope you'll be all right," he said, sounding worried. "Thanks," I replied, "but I think I'll be okay. Thanks again for that prayer," I chuckled. His look growing darker, he replied, "About that, it wasn't a prayer." Confused, I replied, "What do you mean? What was it that you were doing then?" He looked at me with a grim expression and softly replied, "My birthday wish." I don't think any of us are going to truly recover from this, Josh and I especially. They never did find his body, and I'm well aware that they probably never will. But if I learned anything from that night, it's that no matter what it is, new shoes, a game, heck, even a bottle of soda, I will always remember to make a wish after blowing out my birthday candles. Well, that's the story, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you check out my man Page profile on Reddit if you like that story. That's the author. I'll be leaving a link for his stuff in the description. And yeah, make sure you hit that like and subscribe for your boy. And I think I'm going to do a few more of these. This was actually really fun. I enjoyed it a lot. But until next time, I'm out.